Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Beyond Max Q. I'm Mollie Jahner, your host. I am joined by Mark Daly, the CEO of Rolm or Rolm AI. And I'm excited. Honestly, we met via LinkedIn, cold outreach, and he accepted, which is really honestly kind of surprising because a lot of people say no. And so it's really nice to meet someone who's just so open and generous with their network. Those are things that I'm really um, passionate about, and Mark embodies that in every way. He's also building some very cool things and has honestly, I think one of the coolest stories I've heard to date, just in terms of the sheer amount of connections and experiences that he's had. So, with that, Mark, please take an opportunity to introduce yourself.
Well, I appreciate that, Molly. I appreciate the time to spend with you. And the reason why, when you reached out to me, I measure how people reach out to me on LinkedIn or even when they call. And so you had a very approachable but thoughtful message in LinkedIn. And you did a little bit of research, which I appreciate because you get these canned messages all the time. And I probably get 10 people a day that want to connect with me. If they don't have the wherewithal to send me a personalized note as to the value, then I just say no. And so yours had value, and I appreciate the fact that you're doing a podcast and who your audience is. And so my name is Mark Daly. I'm the CEO of Rolm AI. I'm reconstituting a brand that was actually the way I position it, it was the Apple computer of Silicon Valley before there was an Apple computer for the B2B space. And Rolm was a revered Silicon Valley company back in the 70s and 80s. I worked for Rolm, IBM, and Siemens, and I've acquired the trademark to Rolm and reconstituting the company. So that's my story, and thank you very much for your time
And
today.
that's the super, yeah, that's it. The end. Just this great lead in and like, that's it. Cut it. No, I would love for you to talk a little bit about, maybe kind of where you started and, now you find yourself CEO of this amazing company. But you didn't start there. I would love to hear that journey if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. And I was just joking about that.
I know, it's great. It's good.
I don't want to give you too much to edit, but you're gonna have to edit that out. So all right, let me just talk a little bit about the backstory and how this all occurred because Rome was a revered company. Matter of fact, there was a book written about 10 years ago, starting up Silicon Valley, how Rome became a Fortune 500 icon. And the author of that book, Kathy Maxfield, was kind enough to put me in that book several times. And I happened to be in there with some other notable people, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and some other more brand names than Mark Daly. But it was a revered company in that they made products and services better than anybody else. And when you look at the culture of the company, up on my website, I've got a 60 minutes teaser that 60 Minutes did back in the early 80s about the culture of the company and how cool it was. You can see a lot of that permeated into Apple later on. And you can see if you read the book, that Steve Jobs was on campus when he was a teenager. He took some of those elements and brought them into Apple. And when I worked for Rome, it was in the late 80s, early 90s, into the 2000s. And it was acquired. It was acquired by IBM in the 80s for 1.25 billion, and then flipped a few years later to Siemens for a couple of $1 billion or an undisclosed amount. And and I stayed through that whole time period. So I was there for about 30 years, had some incredible experiences, very different cultures of companies owning this Silicon Valley stalwart. And it was interesting because I call them alumni classes of Rome employees. You have an IBM, a Siemens, or a Rome background. There was a common thread throughout the whole thing, and it was a great place to work. And it was actually the original great place to work if you go back to the founding documents in 1969, where wasn't just about the products. It was about how you take care of employees. And employees are as close to customers are the things that are most important in a company. And Rome recognized that early on. And what they did is it was so competitive in Silicon Valley back then. If you stayed with Rome for 6 years, I think it was 6 years, you got 3 months off plus your vacation time. and the campus at Rome was second to none. It was like a five-star
You said it
hotel,
was like a resort.
and
Yeah.
they really set the pace. And so anyway, I picked up the brand name last year. Molly, you want to hear about that?
I do, because it's such a cool story. And I feel like I love this. I'm just calling this out for all the founders because I also struggle with this patience ever since I was little, right? Like it's just never been something that I've been good at. But I think as a founder, like everyone hears speed, 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 like, do this fast, do this fast. And that's very important. But I also think, the inverse can also be true, like patience. And what does that look like? And it's all over your story. So I would love for you to tell it.
All right. So it was like 2004. I had many different roles in the company over all those years, but I got an email from marketing. And then the email from Siemens Marketing at the time said, "Hey, Mark, we've got all these trademarks. Here's a spreadsheet. Tell us what to keep, what not to keep, and tell us why in the comments section." And they had product on there that never went to market, and they were spending a lot of money. You get all the way down to the bottom, and it was Rolm. I said, "Well, that's a keeper." And I said that was a revered Silicon Valley company. I sent it back to marketing, and they write back, "Well, why would we keep that? That doesn't make sense. We bought that company." I said, "Look, if Siemens ever decided to reconstitute it, it's a great brand. It still resonates in the B2B space, in the tech space. I would keep it if I were you." And then a couple days go by, I get another note back, and it's like, "Well, how long do we keep it for?" I could tell by the way I wrote back. I said pretty flippantly, "I keep it to 2020." And the reason why I know all these dates and everything is during 2020 is when COVID hit. So I'm in the basement because I can't go out. We're
I feel like
locked
we were
down,
all in the
and I'm
basement in
cleaning up.
2020. We were all in the basement with you. 2020.
Well, after three children and three successful children, a lot of sports, I'm cleaning out my basement and I find two boxes of my career and I'm going through every page. And I had a habit for many years of writing things on a yellow legal pad and just going through what a wonderful career I had. And I find that email from marketing. And I said, "Man, it's 2020. I wonder what they did." And after I finished up at the basement, shredding a bunch of stuff, I went upstairs and I logged on to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and it said it was abandoned 3 months earlier in 2020. I said, "Whoa, this is kind of interesting. What a great brand!" And it was abandoned. So my daughter's an attorney, and she's a non-practicing attorney, and she works for Deloitte, and I called her and I said, "Hey, Camille, I want to pick up a trademark, but I want an attorney's name next to it in case I get sued." And she laughed. She goes, "Dad, I am not your personal attorney, and trademarks are easy enough. You could figure that out on your own." And giving me all the reasons why she doesn't want to do it. And then she says, "Well, what's the trademark?" And I said, "Rome." And she says, "Oh, I'm sure Siemens owns that." And I hear her clicking away in the keyboard. She says, "Oh my God, it's available." I said, "Yeah, it's available." She goes, "What are you going to do? Flip it?" I said, "Well, I could flip it, or I could start a company." And at the time, I was actually, my company was blown up. My partner, we had an SAP integration firm. My partner of 46 years, unfortunately, had died of a massive heart attack, and the California probate was treating his company because he didn't have a succession plan like one of his guitars, and basically the company was blowing up. So I said, I'm going to need to get a job. So she says, "Well, Dad, a big company like Siemens would crush me if they want that name. You need to get a law firm, and you know enough people to get a big law firm." So I called up a friend of mine, had 143 IP attorneys, and I said, told him what I wanted to do. And he said, "Let me get the top guy on the phone." And he gets him on the phone. He says, "Mark, one thing you'll never find on a website is the courts will give Siemens back that trademark if they petition for it within a 3-year period. Either you wait 3 years or you get a release from Siemens." And I said, "Well, I'm never going to ask them for a release because if they think it's of value, they'll keep it." Number one. Number two, they were like a bank that dabbled in technology. They weren't really a technology company. And so I decided to wait 3 years. And in that 3-year period, I, created a consulting company. And at the 3-year mark, I called up that attorney, and he said, "Mark, you were on my calendar today, and I knew
That's
you would
awesome.
call." And I said, "Let's acquire the trademark."
I mean, first of all, you kept all the files. I'm actually kind of surprised that marketing did what you said, to be honest. Like, shout out to that marketer who was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but hey, they did it. So that's good. But finding the paperwork and then again waiting 3 years. I don't know. I think feel like that's tremendous. So well done there because I think that that's such a tough thing to wait for. But now you have it. So what are you doing with it?
Well, no, and so that gave me 3 years to continue my own consulting practice, but also build out a business plan of what I wanted to do if I got it. Now, do I want to invest a lot of money in it? Because do I know if I'm really going to get it and all that? And then, the attorney came back, Mark, do you want it for just the United States? Do you want it for Canada, Mexico, Europe? I'm looking at the history of this thing, and it was a global company. So I said, well, I want it for North America and part of Europe, and that's what we ended up getting. But during that time frame, I started to plant the right seeds, and there's a fairly large alumni constituency of Rome, former Rome employees up on Facebook. There's 3,300 former Rome employees and an alumni page, and it's a fairly active page. So I started analyzing that. I called up the former, like some former executives, told them what I was going to do, and they were all laughing. And then I called up a dear friend of mine who was only a Rome employee for a short period of time. He was fully engaged as a consultant for Georgia Tech for their incubation group, and he's a Georgia Tech grad, and he cashed out as an entrepreneur last century. And I called him up and I said, hey, Bill, I'm going to start a company. And immediately he said, well, what product do you have? And I said, well, I don't have a product. And he says, well, Mark, you've helped me out over the years with sales and marketing stuff. What do you mean you're going to start a company? You don't have a product? I said, well, I have a brand. And he says, what's the brand? And I said, Rome. And he dropped the phone. He said, you own the Rome brand? I said, I own the Rome brand. He goes, so you could pick products. I said, yes, I can. So the original Rome was founded in a prune shed, and they built military spec computers, and then they later got into the telephony business. But my background is not only technology, but also alliances and channel partnerships, and I could resell other people's stuff. But I know the value of a company isn't of value until you have your own IP. So I started going down the well, how do I obtain my own IP without spending $1 million in software development? And what products do I want to sell or resell? And then what are the margins of those products? And then who do I want to pull in? And so that I kicked off the company in a soft kickoff in September of 2024. Got my first deal with a defense contractor last month, and working with the DoD, NIST, and a few other government agencies, as well as some fairly large commercial accounts, and three different product lines around artificial intelligence, which we own some equity in some companies for AI, cybersecurity, and then because it's Rome, I have to have a telephony element, and UCAS, Unified Communications as a Service,
Okay.
is it's pretty much a commodity market, but it's a stable market, and if you can pull in some nice accounts, it's reoccurring revenue. It's that MRR. That's all SaaS-based business. So I know that market very well. I know the technology very well. It's changed over the years. It's all up in the cloud. But
Right.
those are the three lines of business that we're going after, as well as some ancillary products and some professional services.
Well said. And very exciting. Congratulations on all of the different milestones, because I think that's exciting. I would love to, now that we've heard about what you're doing now, I would love to hear about your founder journey. So, what's it like to be a founder of something?
Well, in that period of time where I was waiting for the trademark, I did a lot of work, consulting work for companies in sales and marketing, and I worked with a lot of founders and startup companies, and so my forte has always been sales and marketing. Now, I was an engineer for a number of years, and I was not a degreed engineer, but what they call a systems engineer, a customer engineer. I installed stuff, I designed networks, did all that stuff. But one of the things I've noticed in my consulting practice was smaller companies, and this is just so true, and it's been written about 1,000 times. These guys build great products, and they don't understand that you got to save money aside for marketing. And you don't, marketing can be a black hole. It can be just pouring money down a black hole. But if you do it the smart way, you do some guerrilla marketing, it doesn't have to be. And obviously, everything's changing right now. You and I are doing a podcast. You could cut this up, you could slice it and dice it, put it on TikTok, Facebook Reels. That marketing didn't exist 15 years ago, and not like it does today. So a lot of these small companies that are out there don't recognize that, and I do. And so I did fairly well as an independent consultant. It's a lot harder to do it under your own shingle than a brand name, but I got some good contracts, and I help small companies go to market. And one of the things that you're doing is with this podcast is you're enabling me that message to get out there of what I'm doing.
Trying to. It's hard. I love finding stories that aren't being told. And I think especially on LinkedIn, if you don't have X number of followers and more, then no one pays attention. And so my whole purpose in doing this is to like, let's hear the stories of people that aren't out there and flashy, because I think that those are some of the most impactful stories because they've done it. They're living and breathing it, just like you. You've survived all these different iterations and different companies and things. And it's like, I want to hear from you because that's where the experience is. It's in the failures, it's in the doing of it. And so that's exactly what this is. I love your sales and marketing background. We actually think very similarly about it. So I'd love to get your thoughts on it for a moment. Yes, I think it can be a black hole, especially in the early days, right? So I always caution founders like, hey, don't sink all of your new VC money or new money or whatever you have into marketing. Figure out what your message is, look at your network and there's a lot of free things that, like you said, to your point, that you can do without just dumping it on a marketing firm. I would love to hear what you think about that.
Well, no, and that's a point where I've seen people just throw away money. The last company I had, it was a little integration, SAP integration company. Um, and when you do anything with SAP, that's big money, right? So to go to Sapphire, which is happening, I think, this week or next week, to have a 10 by 20 booth, to fly people in, to do everything that you want to do, you're looking at 100 grand. And that's a lot of money. So how does a little company do that? It's just an incredible amount of money. And so that's in the big leagues. So what we did after the first year, we used all of our points to get hotels, and we had people in a lot of different countries, and we focused on one area of SAP called Solution Manager. Now it's called Cloud ALM, but and I'm just for the audience. I don't do a lot of SAP work right now. Don't call me for SAP work. I mean, I'll refer you to some great people, but
I'm gonna clip that
it's a
out. Don't
heavy
call
lift.
me. Don't call me.
No, it's a heavy lift, and the sales cycles are too long. But in terms of what we did was to save money was okay. Well, next year, not let's not get stay at the Marriott and use all of our points and all this money. Why don't we get an Airbnb? Get one that's big enough where everybody has their own private bathroom. We get 20 guys we're flying in. We ended up renting this giant Airbnb. Then we flew in a couple of days ahead of time, went to Costco, bought steaks, and just the first day was really a team building day before the actual event. Then we had the on the exhibit floor booth that was being built for us to our specs, and then we got to know each other over that 3 or 4 day period. Then we spent an extra day on the back end. We played some golf, had a nice dinner again. And it took a team of people that were now global, and it really brought them together. And that's one, but that's in the big league. Now, in the small leagues, when you're out there, and like my company right now, it's a small company. I'm very particular where I spend my marketing dollars and where do I focus those dollars. And so target marketing is really important. It's also it's okay to ask for help from people. It's okay to do that, and you should ask for help. And you need to leverage not what you know, but also who you know. And it's okay if they say no. That's okay, but you might need help with well. So Mark Benioff used to write when he started Salesforce. He would go to an Oracle meeting, and he would do some guerrilla marketing. And there's 100 different ways to do some guerrilla marketing. It doesn't cost a lot, and it can help you acquire some big clients. And it's those relationships. I'm in the AI business. I wrote a white paper before chat for anybody who knew what Chat GPT was about AI. It went viral on LinkedIn. And AI, as much as I'm into it right now, is not going to replace relationships that you have with other humans. And I like to call it AI in the loop. You want to have a human in the loop with anything that you're doing with AI, but it's those relationships that'll help move the needle on getting not only new clients, but I needed to build a website. So what do I do? I'm starting this company, Rolm. I have limited funds. What do? I call up a friend of mine who owns a large company. Hey, I need a favor. What's the favor? I need a website built. You got a whole marketing team of people. Well, how much do you want to pay? I said, I don't want to pay anything because you really owe me if you think about it over the years.
I don't want
And
to
the
pay
response,
anything.
the response is like, oh, okay. How long is it going to take? I said, it doesn't matter. I need, so and so for a couple of months. And so that's how I built my website. And trying to be very frugal with your own funds is it's important. And so now now we're acquiring clients. Now that we have a pipeline, I don't mind paying for things. I'm not cheap, but to get started, you have to watch every penny.
Yeah, I just like that quote because I feel like that's, as you said, like if you don't ask, you're not going to get an answer. So, well, what do you want? Well, I don't want to pay anything. Let's see what they say. Maybe they'll say yes. Obviously, you have a lot of amazing relationships that you're leaning into, and I think that's kind of one of the things I want to start to end on is how do you build those relationships? How does that? What does that look like to build a network? What if I'm just starting and I'm like, I don't know anyone?
Well, you know what? I was fortunate in starting my career with large companies, and LinkedIn's a great way, so certainly Facebook and also texting, but maintaining those relationships over the years has helped me. And sometimes I'll think of somebody and I'll just send them a text or I'll just send them a quick message in LinkedIn. Something will happen, will remind me of somebody, and I'll say, hey, remember this? I thought of you today or whatever. Those little pings actually matter, and they matter because it goes over the long haul. In terms of starting out fresh, it's about consistency, it's about execution, it's about your word, and your word actually means something. And if you say you're going to follow up, I mean, it's the basics of of business 101, but that's not necessarily a practice today with people. People are very superficial, and they don't execute well. It's all you could have the best idea in the world, but if you can't execute on it, it doesn't matter. But the follow up is so critically important. I can't stress that enough. And so if you're just starting out, I would say the follow up on whatever it is you're working with is probably as important as the product that you're working on.
Really well said. I love that. I want to end with what are you currently reading?
What am I currently reading? I got a couple books on my desk right now. Now let me see if I can pull it up. This is from my son-in-law, and the true story of murder and memory in Northern Ireland. My son-in-law's last name is Kilcommons, and my he married my daughter there last September, and I got this for Christmas, and I haven't started it yet, but there's actually a show about it right now on Netflix, and he said, Mark, you got to read the book first. So I read a lot of technical magazines. Um, there's a technology reseller magazine that I read on a daily basis that just gives out short articles on the whole spectrum of technology, and that's technologyreseller.com, I think. But I subscribe to them and I get it on my phone. I read the Wall Street Journal. Um, I try to stay up on anything AI or cybersecurity related, and I have a good network of people that I've surrounded myself with that send me articles unsolicited often. So that's what I'm reading.
I love that. And I just want to close with a thank you for coming on because I love your story. I think it's tremendous. And we only have so much time, so I can't capture all of it. And I know that there's so much more for you to say. So if people want to connect with you, please feel free to reach out to Mark. He's tremendous. I've already learned a lot just in the few conversations that we've had, I feel like, from you and your experiences. And check out what Rolm's doing because it's really cool. And I just wanted to give you space to say any last thing that you didn't feel like you got a chance to touch on.
No, just follow us on LinkedIn. It's going to be a good story. It'll be a great story once I'm wildly successful, and I'm on the track to doing that. But in terms of picking up the brand and reconstituting the company, there's actually a Rome reunion happening tonight in Manhattan with 120 people that are attending, and I can't go, and it's killing me because I know probably half of them. But it was a great company, and it's not over yet. It's going to be a great place to work again. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.